Marcus Chen adjusted his tie for the third time as he walked through the gleaming lobby of Meridian Financial Group. The marble floors reflected the soft lighting, and the gentle hum of conversation drifted from the main conference room where Elena's company was hosting their annual achievement celebration. He had been looking forward to this evening for weeks, finally getting the chance to meet Elena's colleagues and see her in her professional element. Elena spotted him immediately, her face lighting up with that familiar smile that had first captured his heart 5 years ago. She wore an elegant navy dress that complemented her confident demeanor perfectly. As she approached, Marcus felt a surge of pride watching her navigate the room with such grace and professionalism. "Marcus, you made it," Elena said, reaching him with obvious relief. "I was worried you might get caught up at the gallery." "I wouldn't miss this for anything," Marcus replied, straightening his shoulders. "You've worked so hard for tonight." As they moved through the crowd, Elena began introducing him to her colleagues. The first few introductions went smoothly enough, though Marcus noticed something odd in Elena's tone. When they approached a group near the appetizer table, including what appeared to be several senior executives, Marcus prepared himself for the moment he'd been anticipating. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Marcus," Elena said, her voice carrying a strange formality. "He's a close friend of mine. Marcus runs a small art gallery downtown." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Close friend. Not husband. Not partner. Close friend. He felt his smile falter for just a moment before forcing it back into place, hoping no one had noticed the flicker of confusion and hurt that crossed his features. The group welcomed him warmly enough, asking polite questions about his gallery and making pleasant small talk about the local art scene. Marcus responded automatically, his mind spinning as he tried to process what had just happened. Throughout their 5-year marriage, Elena had never hesitated to introduce him as her husband. She wore her wedding ring proudly and often spoke about him with obvious affection. As the evening progressed, the pattern continued. To the marketing team, "This is Marcus, a close friend." To the accounting department, "Meet Marcus, he's a good friend of mine." Each introduction felt like another small knife to his heart. Marcus found himself studying Elena's face during these moments, searching for some explanation in her expression. Was she embarrassed by him? Had he said something wrong? His casual blazer and khakis suddenly felt inadequate compared to the sharp business attire surrounding them. Maybe she thought he didn't fit in with her successful colleagues. The worst moment came when they encountered Elena's immediate team near the bar. These were people Elena spoke about regularly at home, colleagues she respected and worked closely with every day. Surely she would acknowledge their relationship here. "Team, I want you to meet Marcus," Elena began, and Marcus held his breath. "He's been a really good friend to me. Marcus, these are my amazing teammates." The word friend echoed in Marcus's mind as he shook hands and exchanged pleasantries. He noticed Elena's hands trembling slightly as she reached for her wine glass, but attributed it to nervousness about the evening rather than any deeper emotion. Director Sarah Mitchell, a woman in her early 50s with sharp eyes and an authoritative presence, observed the interactions from across the room. Marcus caught her watching them several times throughout the evening, her expression thoughtful and somewhat concerned. When Elena excused herself to speak with some clients, Sarah's gaze lingered on Marcus with what looked like sympathy. As the party continued, Marcus felt increasingly isolated despite being surrounded by friendly people. He smiled and laughed at appropriate moments, discussed his passion for contemporary art, and complimented the elegant venue, all while feeling as though he were watching the evening unfold from outside his own body. When Elena returned to his side, she seemed more tense than before. "Are you having a good time?" she asked, though her eyes didn't quite meet his. "Of course," Marcus replied, though the words felt hollow. "Your colleagues are wonderful." But inside, questions multiplied with each passing moment, and the celebration felt more like a test he was somehow failing without understanding the rules. The evening air was crisp as Marcus stepped onto the building's rooftop garden, seeking refuge from the suffocating atmosphere inside. The city lights twinkled below, and the soft murmur of the party felt mercifully distant through the glass doors. He loosened his tie and took a deep breath, trying to process the emotional whirlwind of the past 2 hours. "Mind if I join you?" Marcus turned to find Director Sarah Mitchell approaching, 2 glasses of wine in her hands. Her earlier authoritative presence had softened into something more maternal and understanding. "Please," Marcus said, accepting the offered glass gratefully. "I needed some air." Sarah leaned against the railing beside him, studying the skyline with practiced ease. These corporate events can be overwhelming, even for those of us who attend them regularly. She paused, taking a measured sip of her wine. "I imagine tonight has been particularly challenging for you." Marcus glanced at her sharply. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Marcus, I've been Elena's director for 3 years," Sarah said gently. "I know exactly who you are, and I know how much you mean to her." She turned to face him fully, her expression serious but kind. "What happened in there tonight? It wasn't what it seemed." "She introduced me as a friend," Marcus said, the words coming out more bitter than he intended. "Multiple times. To everyone." Sarah nodded slowly. "She did. And I'm sure that hurt terribly." She set down her wine glass and folded her hands. "Marcus, there's something you need to know about your wife, something she's been keeping from you to protect your feelings." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. "What do you mean?" "Elena has been working 60-hour weeks for the past 8 months, Sarah began. "She's taken on every extra project I've offered, volunteered for weekend assignments, and requested additional responsibilities that come with overtime pay. When I asked her about it, she was evasive at first. She mentioned being busy, but I thought it was just a demanding period," Marcus said, confusion evident in his voice. Sarah's expression grew more serious. "3 months ago, I found Elena crying in her office after what should have been a celebration lunch for landing our biggest client of the year. When I pressed her, she finally told me the truth." Sarah paused, gathering her thoughts. "Your mother's medical bills, Marcus. The experimental treatment that insurance won't cover. Elena has been paying for all of it." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. His mother's Alzheimer's treatment had been a source of constant worry, but he'd assumed the insurance complications were being resolved through the hospital's financial aid program. "That's impossible," Marcus whispered. "The social worker said there were assistance programs." "Elena applied for those programs in your name," Sarah continued. "When they were denied, she didn't tell you. Instead, she's been covering the $2,300 monthly treatment costs herself, plus the additional expenses for the specialized care facility." Marcus gripped the railing, his knuckles white. "But how? Her salary couldn't possibly." "The extra projects, the overtime, the weekend consulting work she's been doing for our sister companies," Sarah explained. "She's been earning nearly double her regular salary and channeling every extra penny toward your mother's care. She drives that 15-year-old Honda because she refuses to spend money on herself. She brings lunch from home every day and hasn't bought new clothes in months." The revelation hit Marcus with devastating clarity. He thought of all the times Elena had waved off his concerns about her long hours, insisting she was just ambitious. He remembered her declining dinner invitations, claiming she was too tired, while secretly she was working to save his mother's life. "Why didn't she tell me?" Marcus asked, his voice breaking. Sarah's expression softened further. "Because she knows you, Marcus. She knows you would never let her sacrifice her financial security for your family. She told me you'd already tried to take out a second mortgage on the gallery, and she couldn't bear to watch you destroy your life's work." Marcus closed his eyes, remembering the heated argument they'd had 6 months ago when he'd suggested selling the gallery. Elena had been adamant that he pursue his dreams, insisting they would find another way to handle his mother's care. "But why introduce me as a friend tonight?" Marcus asked. "What does that have to do with anything?" Sarah hesitated, then sighed deeply. "Because James Wright from accounting has a very loud mouth and very little discretion. Last year, he spread rumors about Maria Santos's husband losing his job, turning her personal struggles into office gossip. Elena was terrified that if people knew about your mother's situation, it would become the subject of break-room speculation. She was protecting me," Marcus realized, the pieces finally falling into place. "She was protecting your dignity, your mother's privacy, and her own ability to continue helping," Sarah confirmed. "Elena works in finance, Marcus. If her colleagues knew she was supporting another family's medical expenses on her salary, some might question her financial judgment or stability. In our industry, perception matters for advancement opportunities. Marcus stared at the city lights, understanding flooding through him like cold water. Elena hadn't been ashamed of him. She'd been sacrificing everything, including public acknowledgement of their relationship, to save his mother's life without destroying his pride. "She loves you more than I've ever seen anyone love another person," Sarah said quietly. "Every conversation we have somehow circles back to you and your work. She keeps photos of your art pieces on her desk and lights up when talking about your latest exhibition." Marcus wiped away tears he hadn't realized were falling, the weight of Elena's secret sacrifice settling over him like a heavy blanket of both gratitude and guilt. The weight of Sarah's revelation sent Marcus's mind reeling backward through the past 8 months, reframing every memory with devastating new clarity. As he stood on the rooftop garden, fragments of conversations and moments he dismissed suddenly arranged themselves into a heartbreaking mosaic of Elena's secret struggle. He remembered the morning in March when Dr. Rebecca Torres, his mother's neurologist, had called with news about the experimental treatment program. Elena had insisted on accompanying him to that appointment, her hand tight in his as Dr. Torres explained the potential benefits of the new medication cocktail. "The treatment shows remarkable promise for slowing cognitive decline," Dr. Torres had said, her voice cautiously optimistic. "However, it's still in clinical trials, which means insurance coverage is unlikely. The monthly cost would be approximately $2,300, plus additional fees for the specialized monitoring required." Marcus had felt the bottom drop out of his world. His mother, once a vibrant librarian who had raised him alone after his father's death, was already struggling to recognize his face on good days. The possibility of slowing her decline seemed like a miracle, but the financial reality felt insurmountable. "We'll find a way," Elena had whispered, squeezing his hand. "Let us think about it, Doctor. We'll be in touch within the week." That evening, Marcus had spread their financial documents across the kitchen table, calculator in hand, trying to make impossible numbers work. Elena had watched from the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Marcus, we can't afford this," he'd finally admitted, his voice breaking. "Even if I sold half my gallery inventory, we couldn't sustain those payments for more than a few months." "Your mother needs this treatment," Elena had replied firmly. "We'll figure something out." Now, standing in the cool night air, Marcus realized that Elena had already been formulating her plan. The very next week, she'd mentioned casually that Sarah had offered her some additional consulting projects. "Just some extra work on the weekends," she'd said. "It might be good for my career advancement." Marcus thought about the changes that had followed. Elena, who had always been punctual about leaving the office at 5:30, suddenly found herself staying until 7 or 8 most evenings. Weekend plans became rare as she claimed to be swamped with special assignments. She'd grown thin, her energy flagging despite her attempts to maintain her usual cheerfulness. The most painful memory surfaced, the night 3 weeks ago when Marcus had found Elena asleep at the kitchen table, her laptop open to a spreadsheet filled with numbers he hadn't understood. When he'd gently woken her to suggest moving to bed, she'd quickly closed the screen. "Just some budget projections for work," she'd mumbled. But now he realized she'd been calculating the exact costs of his mother's treatment, matching them against her overtime earnings. Dr. Torres had become a regular presence in Elena's carefully hidden world. Marcus now understood why Elena always volunteered to handle the insurance paperwork and communication with the medical team. She'd been the one making the payments, handling the logistics, and ensuring that his mother received the best possible care while maintaining the fiction that assistance programs were covering the costs. The social worker, Janet Chen, had been Elena's unwitting accomplice. When Marcus had called to express gratitude for the financial aid approval, Janet had seemed confused before quickly recovering. Elena must have coached her on what to say, perhaps even visiting the office in person to ensure their stories aligned. Marcus remembered Elena's strange behavior around his mother's care facility. She'd always found reasons to visit during his work hours, claiming she enjoyed spending time with his mother when the facility was quieter. Now he realized she'd been meeting with billing coordinators, ensuring payments were current and that his mother's treatment schedule remained uninterrupted. The Honda Civic made sense now too. Elena had been driving the same car since college, and Marcus had often suggested they upgrade to something more reliable. Elena always deflected, saying the car was perfectly functional and that newer cars were a waste of money. He'd attributed this to her naturally frugal nature, never imagining she was conserving every possible dollar for his mother's care. Even her clothing choices told a story he'd missed. Elena, who had once enjoyed occasional shopping trips and took pride in her professional wardrobe, had been wearing the same rotation of outfits for months. When Marcus complimented a dress, she'd often mention it was an old favorite she'd rediscovered in her closet. The lunch situation was perhaps the most telling detail. Elena had always enjoyed trying new restaurants near her office, often texting him photos of interesting meals or recommendations for future dates. That habit had stopped abruptly 8 months ago, replaced by elaborate explanations about developing an interest in meal preparation and health-conscious eating. Marcus thought about James Wright, the accounting colleague Sarah had mentioned. He'd met James briefly at a holiday party last year and remembered him as someone who spoke too loudly and asked invasive questions. Elena had steered them away from him quickly that evening, and now Marcus understood why she'd been so cautious about keeping her personal life separate from workplace gossip. The most devastating realization was how completely Elena had protected not just his pride, but his peace of mind. While he'd been focusing on his gallery exhibitions and artistic development, Elena had been quietly ensuring that his mother received life-changing medical care. She'd carried the entire financial and emotional burden alone, never once suggesting that her own dreams or comfort should factor into the equation. Standing on that rooftop, Marcus finally understood the true depth of Elena's love, a love so profound that it expressed itself not through grand gestures or public declarations, but through silent, daily sacrifices that preserved his dignity while saving his mother's life. Marcus made his way back through the party with newfound purpose, his heart pounding as he searched for Elena among the clusters of corporate colleagues. The celebration continued around him, but the festive atmosphere felt surreal after Sarah's revelations. He found Elena near the presentation area, engaged in animated conversation with 2 senior executives about quarterly projections. When she noticed him approaching, her smile flickered with uncertainty. "Marcus, there you are. I was wondering where you'd disappeared to." "Elena, we need to talk," Marcus said quietly, his voice more serious than she'd heard in months. "Privately." The executives, sensing the shift in energy, politely excused themselves. Elena's face grew pale as she followed Marcus toward a quieter corner of the conference room, her hands trembling slightly as she set down her wine glass. "Is everything okay?" she asked, though her eyes suggested she already suspected this conversation had been inevitable. Marcus studied her face, seeing exhaustion lines he'd attributed to normal work stress, noticing the way her dress hung slightly looser than it had last year. "Sarah told me about the overtime work. About my mother's treatment. About everything." Elena's composure cracked instantly. Her shoulders sagged as though she'd been holding up an enormous weight, and tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. "Marcus, I can explain." "Why?" The single word carried months of confusion, hurt, and now overwhelming gratitude. "Why didn't you tell me?" Elena looked around frantically, ensuring they weren't being overheard, then grabbed his hand and led him toward her office down the hall. The small space felt intimate after the crowded party, filled with evidence of the woman he thought he knew. Her desk held the photos Sarah had mentioned, images of his latest paintings, a candid shot of them hiking last summer, a picture of his mother from before her diagnosis. "Because you would have stopped me," Elena said, closing the door behind them. "You would have insisted on selling the gallery, or taking out loans that would have destroyed everything you've worked for. You would have sacrificed your entire future for your mother's treatment." "It was my responsibility," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "She's my mother." "And you're my husband," Elena replied fiercely. "Which means your mother is my family too. Which means her care is my responsibility too." She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, smearing her carefully applied makeup. "Do you think I could just stand by and watch you destroy your life's work? Your art isn't just a job, Marcus, it's who you are." Marcus sank into the chair across from her desk, overwhelmed by the magnitude of her sacrifice. But the financial strain, the extra work, the exhaustion, was nothing compared to watching you blame yourself for not being able to afford her treatment, Elena interrupted. "Do you remember that night when you called the social worker, crying because you thought we'd have to move your mother to a state facility? You were destroying yourself with guilt." The memory hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd spent that entire evening researching state-run memory care facilities, knowing they couldn't provide the specialized attention his mother needed but feeling powerless to offer anything better. Elena had held him while he sobbed, promising they'd find a solution. "I made a choice," Elena continued, her voice growing steadier. "I chose to work extra hours so that your mother could have the best possible care and you could continue pursuing your art without the crushing weight of impossible medical bills. I chose to protect both of you." "But tonight," Marcus said, "introducing me as a friend." Elena's face crumpled again. "That was the hardest part. Marcus, you have to understand, James Wright has already started asking questions about my overtime hours. If people knew I was supporting medical expenses on my salary, some might see it as financially irresponsible. In corporate finance, perception affects advancement opportunities." "You were protecting your ability to keep earning the money," Marcus realized. "And protecting your mother's privacy," Elena added. "She doesn't need her medical condition becoming office gossip. She doesn't need people pitying her or feeling sorry for our family situation." Marcus thought about Lisa Park, the HR representative who had been circulating through the party earlier. Sarah had mentioned warnings about personal life discussions, and now he understood the delicate balance Elena had been maintaining. "There's something else," Elena said quietly, opening her desk drawer and pulling out a folder. "I've been meeting with a financial advisor about our long-term planning. If your mother responds well to the treatment, we might be able to reduce the frequency of the experimental medications next year. The money I've been earning could then go toward a down payment on a house, maybe even expanding your gallery." Marcus stared at the folder containing what looked like detailed financial projections and property listings. Elena had been planning not just for his mother's immediate care, but for their entire future. "You've thought of everything," he whispered. "I've had to," Elena replied. "Because I love you too much to watch you sacrifice everything for something I could handle myself. Because your dreams matter to me as much as they matter to you. Because taking care of the people we love isn't supposed to destroy us, it's supposed to make us stronger." Marcus stood and moved around the desk, pulling Elena into his arms. She collapsed against his chest, finally allowing herself to fully cry for the first time in months. The weight of her secret, the exhaustion of her double life, and the relief of finally being understood poured out of her in racking sobs. "I'm so sorry," Marcus murmured against her hair. "I'm sorry I didn't see what you were doing. I'm sorry I let you carry this alone." "I wasn't alone," Elena whispered. "I had you. Your happiness, your peace of mind, your success, that's what kept me going. Knowing that your mother was getting better and you could focus on your art made every extra hour worth it." They held each other in the quiet office, surrounded by evidence of Elena's hidden sacrifices and careful planning, finally sharing the burden that had been hers alone for 8 months. 1 month later, the same conference room at Meridian Financial Group buzzed with anticipation for a very different kind of celebration. Elena's promotion to senior director had been announced the previous week, and tonight's gathering was meant to honor her achievement and introduce her expanded role to clients and colleagues. Marcus adjusted his new navy suit, a gift Elena had insisted on buying to celebrate her promotion, and smiled as he watched her work the room with newfound confidence. The weight that had pressed on her shoulders for months had lifted, replaced by an energy and joy he hadn't seen in far too long. "Ladies and gentlemen," CEO Robert Davis called for attention from the front of the room. "We're here tonight to celebrate not just Elena's well-deserved promotion, but her exceptional dedication to both professional excellence and personal integrity." Elena caught Marcus's eye from across the room, her smile radiant. They'd spent the past month rebuilding their communication, establishing new financial planning strategies, and most importantly, learning to share burdens instead of carrying them alone. His mother's treatment was showing promising results, and they'd worked with Dr. Torres to establish a sustainable payment plan that utilized both of their incomes. "Before we hear from Elena herself," Robert continued, "I'd like to invite someone special to say a few words. Elena, would you like to introduce your guest?" Elena's eyes sparkled with anticipation as she moved to the front of the room. "Thank you, Robert. I'm thrilled to introduce someone who has been my inspiration, my support system, and my greatest blessing for the past 5 years." She paused, her voice strong and clear. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my husband, Marcus Chen." The applause was warm and genuine, but Marcus barely heard it. The word husband rang in his ears like music after that painful evening a month ago. He made his way to Elena's side, taking her hand as she beamed at him with unmistakable pride. "Thank you," Marcus began, his prepared speech momentarily forgotten as he looked at the faces around the room, many of the same colleagues who had witnessed that awkward night of introductions. "A month ago, I attended a party in this very room, and I thought I understood what dedication looked like. I thought I knew what love meant." He turned to Elena, his voice growing stronger. "I was wrong. Love isn't just the grand gestures or the public declarations. Love is working 60-hour weeks to save someone else's mother. Love is sacrificing your own comfort to preserve someone else's dreams. Love is carrying impossible burdens in silence because you'd rather suffer than watch the person you care about struggle." Elena's eyes filled with tears, but her smile never wavered. "My wife spent 8 months secretly funding my mother's experimental Alzheimer's treatment," Marcus continued, addressing the room. "She worked overtime, took on extra projects, and gave up every luxury in her life to ensure my mother received care that insurance wouldn't cover. She did this while I remained blissfully unaware, focused on my art gallery and completely oblivious to the sacrifice happening right under my nose." Sarah Mitchell wiped her eyes from her position near the bar, remembering her role in revealing Elena's secret. "Elena introduced me as a friend that night because she was protecting my mother's privacy, safeguarding her own professional reputation, and ensuring she could continue earning the money needed for the treatment. She was willing to endure my hurt feelings and confusion rather than risk exposing the lifeline she'd become for my family." Marcus pulled out a small wrapped package from his jacket pocket. "Elena, you've spent 8 months giving everything for my family. Tonight, I wanted to give you something that represents how I see you." Elena unwrapped the gift with trembling hands, revealing a small silver pendant in the shape of a lighthouse. "Because," Marcus explained, "you've been the light guiding us through the storm, even when we couldn't see the beacon ourselves." The room erupted in applause, but Marcus wasn't finished. "My mother's condition has stabilized significantly thanks to the treatment Elena made possible. Her memory is clearer, her confusion episodes are less frequent, and she's regained some of the joy we thought we'd lost forever. None of this would have been possible without my wife's extraordinary sacrifice." Elena stepped forward, her voice clear despite her tears. "Thank you all for celebrating with us tonight. This promotion means the world to me, but not because of the title or the increased salary. It means everything because it represents the ability to build the future Marcus and I have been working toward together." She looked directly at James Wright, who stood near the accounting team looking somewhat sheepish. "I've learned that protecting the people we love sometimes requires difficult choices. But I've also learned that the people who matter, the colleagues who become friends, the managers who become mentors, will understand and support those choices when they're made with integrity." CEO Robert stepped forward again, his expression warm. "I have a confession to make," he said, drawing surprised looks from around the room. "I've known about Elena's family situation for several months. Sarah brought it to my attention when Elena's performance reviews became so exceptional that we wondered if she was overworking herself." Elena looked shocked, but Robert continued with a smile. "We've been quietly ensuring that her overtime assignments were the most lucrative possible and that her project load included opportunities for advancement. We believe in supporting employees who demonstrate such remarkable dedication to both their professional responsibilities and personal values." Lisa Park from HR stepped forward, nodding in agreement. "Elena's situation actually helped us develop new guidelines for supporting employees facing family medical emergencies. We want our team members to know they can seek help rather than struggling alone." As the evening continued, colleagues approached Marcus and Elena throughout the night, many sharing their own stories of hidden struggles and family challenges. The conversation that had begun with hurt feelings and misunderstanding had evolved into a celebration of love, sacrifice, and the kind of partnership that makes seemingly impossible challenges manageable. Near the end of the evening, as Marcus and Elena prepared to leave, Sarah approached them one final time. "You know," she said quietly, "that night on the rooftop, I wasn't sure if revealing Elena's secret was the right choice. But watching you both tonight, seeing how you've grown stronger together, I know it was." Elena squeezed Marcus's hand as they walked to the parking garage. "So," she said with a mischievous smile, How do you feel about being married to a senior director? I feel like I'm married to a woman who would move mountains for the people she loves, Marcus replied, stopping to face her under the soft lighting. And I feel like the luckiest man alive. As they drove home together, Marcus thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment, the misunderstanding, the revelation, the healing, and now the celebration. Elena's sacrifice had saved his mother's life and preserved his dreams, but more than that, it had shown him what true partnership could look like when two people were willing to carry each other's burdens. The lighthouse pendant caught the light from passing street lamps, a small but powerful reminder that love sometimes shines brightest in the darkness, guiding the way home even when the path seems impossible to navigate.